All right, welcome to the way it should be. I'm JD.
Hello, I'm Dean.
Today we have Mr. Chris Owens with us.
Hey, Chris.
Mr. Jack Lloyd with us. Chris, will you start to let us know who you are? Tell everybody who you are.
Yeah, so Chris Owens, live in Mansfield here in Texas. I've been on the show a couple times. I'm the one who has the autograph authentication business. I've been around a lot of comic cons and pop culture cons. So I think the guys saw it fitting to have me aboard for this episode.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Mr. Lloyd, let us know about yourself, please, sir.
Sure. So I consider myself a producer for Liberty, which means that I use a hodgepodge of different skills to do creative works, from music and music videos to a comic book series called Voluntaryist, to educational videos with the philosopher, memes, merch, events, and all different types of things, to help people understand the principles of liberty and also have a lot of fun in the process. And, work has been going on for quite a long time. And even through the years, I eventually came to a point of writing different nonfiction books. So I have 3 nonfiction books out that also go through the principles besides the fun and entertaining stuff. And before I was doing that, I've been a criminal defense attorney. I've been a state school teacher and a tutor and tutoring company owner and things like that. So I have a bit of experience in working with things within the state and with young people and getting to see how bad things can be. And so I bring that all to the table to help people think about how to think outside the state.
Awesome.
Yeah,
wow,
that's
that's a criminal offense attorney, a school teacher. That is in the state there. That's
It's a hell of a
Very much
resume.
so.
yeah, hell of a
Yes,
resume.
We saw it from the inside out.
How did you what brought you to the idea to write your comic books, I guess?
Yeah. So when I was finishing up law school and studying for the bar, I was wanting to do something more creative instead of just studying all day, and was really thinking about how to integrate my love of liberty with something that I was also passionate about, which was the superhero genre. I was, big into, seeing all the different nerd movies that have been coming out with, Batman and Spider-Man and all that good stuff. So I had this idea that maybe I could make some type of film that could tie in these principles that I hold dear into that genre. And I worked on a film treatment, but realized that it would be a little expensive to do that just right. It takes a bigger budget. And I thought that maybe doing the comic book realm, which, I was somewhat familiar with, just being a little bit of a comic book fan, that might be able to get my message across in a creative way, but more realistically on a budget. And so I ran with that and started to create Voluntaryist, a comic series, worked with a primary artist for the designs, wrote some scripts or kind of transformed the scripts that I had and turned them into more of a comic book format. And then started fundraising on Indiegogo for that. And I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And we've had the last 5 campaigns over 100% funding, including nearly 20,000 on the last campaign. And right now we have the next arc, Voluntaryist Suit Saga 1, out on Indiegogo. We're actually over 100% funded on that already, even though we're not finished the campaign. And we've unlocked the first layer of stretch goals on that too. So that's pretty amazing. So it's been a lot of fun being able to work on this series over the years and develop it and grow my skills, in the process and learn from mistakes, that kind of thing.
That's great. I love hearing stories about how people work within their passion. And obviously it's something you have a passion for. I do want to ask, so you obviously, beyond just fulfilling a fantasy of creating your own comic book series, I think there was a purpose there, a greater purpose, and you touched on it as far as sharing the ideas of liberty, perhaps with people that those ideas don't normally reach. So what kind of techniques did you use in your stories to do that very thing?
Sure. So my series Voluntaryist is not really like a preachy thing or anything like that. It's not meant to be something that like converts people to liberty. It's actually just a regular story. But what I was frustrated with in the mainstream was that every single comic book, and movie series basically defaulted to the state being a good thing, or maybe there's just some bad apples that need to be removed, right? There's no fundamental challenge to the nature of statism as a theme in virtually all comic books. So I saw it as an opportunity for myself to bring to the table something that just really hadn't been done well before or right, and wanted to have a story that rejected that backdrop as a default norm, which is so pervasive to the point that people don't even think about it. They'll see Captain America and there's all these different American flags on them around them, but they don't think anything about that because it's their home country. If Captain America was instead Captain North Korea and he had a bunch of North Korean flags around him, it'd be pretty obvious what his political representation is. So, people just get acclimated to it and they don't even, really think about it anymore. Even though I would say most all comic book stories are to a degree moral or political. There is always going to be some type of message about what is right or wrong based on direct statements or based on what's accepted as normal or okay and not challenged. So that's kind of my contribution, to this genre, is doing something that I believe really hasn't been done before in this way, especially in the superhero genre. And I've been working the origins part of that for about 6 years, with the canon story actually just having its completion, the kind of basics to the universe and the characters made development aspects in Origins. And we had this trade paperback that just came out with a full wrap print. It's pretty. And now we're on to the next arc, Suit Saga.
Yeah, you know what I like about this, the comic book aspect that you've taken, is that it's way different than telling somebody, go read Hayek or read Rothbard or go read Atlas Struggles, or Atlas Shrugs, which is a crazy dense book to read, So this is a great way to get like younger people involved in learning about what liberty is. It's a really great idea.
And you may remember this, but even Ron Paul said that that young people should promote the ideas of liberty through culture, so pop culture, which includes music, movies, things like comic books. So I think you're kind of doing that very thing.
Oh yeah, I mean that's certainly been my number one focus. For a long time now, is doing the culture thing. We did it back in the day with this page called Anarchy Ball, which at the time kind of seeped the anarcho-capitalist message into the mainstream and took the ideas that were put together at the Mises Institute and made them more culturally relevant and widespread on the internet. And so me and a ragtag team of people did those types of content and that type of memeing and helped educate people in the process through debates, and videos and different types of images and things like that. And then eventually that evolved, further with different things that I ended up doing, of course, with music and music videos. We actually just finished a music video called Break the Great Reset, which talks about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, which was a lot of fun to shoot. And we've definitely have produced a lot of content that's helped educate people or inspire people or challenge people in artful ways where maybe otherwise they wouldn't engage with the content and the ideas.
Right. That music video, I heard about. I was listening to a Tom Woods episode. I think somebody was on there talking about shooting a music video about the Great Reset.
This probably is.
Was that? I guess it was the same one you were talking about. I don't know who was involved with that.
Maybe I've been on the show, but it's mostly talking about my book, A Vision for a Libertarian Future. That was the theme of that episode with Tom. Can't remember offhand if I said it in passing, but definitely we did shoot, that video and release it this year. So we were shooting that in the summer and then we released it in October. And of course, we also shot Tom Woods' house, that song. So that was fun.
That's awesome.
That was catchy.
Thank you. Yeah, we did Tom Woods' house, that song. We actually shot that at his house and we didn't have a long time to do it. So we had to do it early in the middle of the day while he was preparing for Doc Dixon to do his magical performance upstairs. And so we had a running gun and shoot that music video, in a tight situation, a tight budget. But we got, drone footage. We got some, cool footage in different rooms and outside. And Tom was even gracious enough to appear, make a cameo in the video, which made it extra hilarious. And that was a ton of fun to shoot. So
I'm curious, what brought you to the libertarian way of thinking or the voluntarist way of thinking? Have you always been this way, or did you grow up like in a household with this, or how did you come about it?
So I didn't grow up in a household with this at all. I would say I basically almost got no solid libertarian ideas or thinking until I was in college. And I came from a neoconservative household where, they'd support Bush and the wars and stuff like that. So, I came from that kind of an angle. And it wasn't until I was in a history class in college where we were learning about the American eugenics movement, where we were studying up on a case of Buck v. Bell, where Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes forcibly required this woman, Carrie Buck, to be sterilized because she was epileptic, and they thought that she was feeble-minded, and they said 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. And I was shocked to hear that. I had no idea that the eugenics movement actually was starting in America, not in Germany.
Mhm.
And it caused me to challenge everything that I knew, because I said to myself, if I never knew this, what else don't I know about American history? And that caused me to go down many rabbit holes, including one with Alex Jones. That was fun back in the day watching,
I think everybody has.
Everybody went down the Alex Jones hole.
Yeah, definitely was doing that back in 2005. So that was pretty fun. But the development after that, after I was researching elements of history and I had access to my college's university search system, so I can go up on JSTOR and really look at documents, see for myself what was true, what was false. I realized, okay, government's not as great as it's been sold. The government's actually way more thieving and violent and covers up so much corruption. It was really mind-blowing, and I was kind of shocked. So I continued to challenge my thinking. I started to read about and research other thinkers in libertarian space. I think especially Lysander Spooner, the Constitutional Authority, was influential for me. Mark Stevens of the No State Project was as well. Larkin Rose, certainly saw some of his stuff early days. Stefan Molyneux back then. So I got to start to see in the online sphere different thinkers and challenge my thinking, and eventually go from what was neoconservative to paleoconservative to libertarian to voluntarist across 2005 to 2010, essentially. So I did that kind of sliding scale journey, being a full-fledged knowledgeable voluntarist, actually well researched in it by 2010, but a libertarian, throughout in development, of course, during that time, realizing, okay, the government said we need to, reduce the size, scope, power of the state, and then sliding that scale all the way down to, okay, the state is inherently unethical as a construct. Getting there was a big deal.
So I want to talk about your nonfiction works here for a second. So your first book is titled Libertarian Voluntarism, correct?
Right. The Definitive Guide to Libertarian Voluntarism.
Okay. So obviously you make a distinction between libertarianism and voluntarism if you're using the two words separately. And I wanted to pick your brain on that. See, and first let me tell you what I think. So, and then I want to hear your thoughts. Voluntarism, I see as a larger concept of human interactions being consensual, without coercion, without force, and on a voluntary basis. So I see that as the broader piece, and then libertarianism I see as more of a political philosophy. So basically applying that larger concept to the political realm. How do you see that? And why did you use two different words in the title?
Sure. So how I write it in my book is more so that voluntarism is the consent ethics aspect of thinking. So it's looking to see what makes consent, what manifests it, how it can be observed and acted upon, and guide ethical behavior. And then libertarianism, as I define it, is the property rights ethic, which is defining the bounds of what property rights are, and what makes ethical property rights. And when you combine the two, you have the right scope of what are property rights, and then you have the right scope of what then meters ethical behavior as among property rights through voluntarism. And so voluntarism on its own, I think there's people who have different ideas about their economic arrangements and things they'd want. I think there's things to debate about that and to dismiss from the socialist communist bent. But regardless, certainly people can consent to a wide range of things, to a degree. So I think that the voluntarism aspect is setting that apart, the consent ethics aspect, and then libertarianism is standing against other forms of economic order proponents, whether it's syndicalism or mutualism, communism, socialism, and things like that. Libertarianism is against those things as being the mandatory ethical backdrops, right, which would distinguish libertarians from communists and socialists.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes
perfect.
sense.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I was thinking you meant by that. It's great. I don't got anything. Go.
So let's jump back to your comic series if we can.
Sure.
The main character is, and I'm sure it's a coincidence, his name is Jack Lloyd. And it's remarkable how that worked out, right? But how much of yourself did you put in that character in the story?
So what I think people don't know is that the Jack Lloyd name here that I use is just a moniker. It's just a stage name.
Okay.
So I use that in my social media for the sake of promoting the comic. That's about it. Yeah, it's not my real name, but I actually don't put much in terms of myself overall into the character. I would say the character is uniquely developed. He has a different history from me in terms of where he's born. He has a different history from me in terms of his parents and their occupation. He has a different history from me in terms of what he chooses to go to school for. He has a different personality from me. So there are certainly things that might tie to my own experiences in terms of things I've seen in life or ideas. But I think that if someone was trying to see like, oh, is this just a mirror of me? No, it's definitely not. It's very distinct, and I consciously made sure to do that when I wrote the character and developed that all.
Okay. And so you know who Eric July is. Obviously, you're probably friends with Eric.
We're casual acquaintances, but
Okay.
yes, definitely know who Eric July is. Yeah.
All right. Well, so then my follow-up question was going to be, of course, he has the Isom series. He's got his own Rippaverse over there, has his own comic book universe that he's established. And one of the big things for the uninitiated in comic books was when the two main publishers might have a crossover, Spider-Man meets Superman or something to the like. But do you envision, have you talked to him or had any sort of approached him in any way about maybe doing a crossover with the characters?
No, I haven't. And I'd say probably one of the big reasons why is that, and I admonish this to everyone who's a creator, when you're creating your series, you want to make sure that you're spending your time building up your own universe first and having that be well established before even considering anything like crossovers. Because if you're spending your time doing that, you're diverting resources from expanding your own universe. So it comes at, opportunity cost, it comes in expense. So I say to not do that unless it's something way down the road and, it would be a fan service fun thing where you already have well-established characters and developed, kind of tropes and things like that. I think it's a much later thing, if anything. Would I be open to something like that as a fun crossover down the road? Yeah, of course. It could always be fun. I could imagine anything. It'd be, of course, fan service is always great like that, having fun like that. I just don't think that would be likely on either of our horizons anytime soon, as both of us are in the mode of building up those universes and building up those fandoms.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna kind of jump around here, I guess. Where are you with the current Libertarian Party? What's your thoughts as far as what we're looking at now with all the candidates that have thrown their name in the hat now, and where do you think the Libertarian Party is come election, I guess?
Well, right now, the Libertarian Party has gone through a major shift and overhaul ever since the Mises Caucus takeover. They've had to basically retool a bunch of different things and get things, back into running order. Before, there was a lot of mismanagement, poor messaging optics, and there was also some malinvestment into CRM software that was not functional. A lot of data was lost. So there's a lot of things to gap. And right now they're currently restructuring and rebuilding up that. And they've done so now successfully. They've been able to turn it around after getting a lot of things sorted that took a while to get sorted. And then in terms of the political candidates, I think a lot of people, and I would share the same sentiment, are disappointed that Dave Smith did not run. Because he was supposed to be doing that. And so his not doing that, I think, was a bit of a disservice to the people who had joined and supported along for that purpose, that he had built up those hopes. That said, the other candidates are not nearly as mainstream, I guess you could say, out there and exciting. So that is a disadvantage. The candidates who are out there currently are just not going to be as readily recognized and have as much access. So it's not like there aren't good people among those people. There's certainly people who I think, have good messages, or who, maybe would be generally good, with the right support and team and growth, but it's not, I think, as groundbreaking or as exciting as you could have with a candidate like someone like Dave Smith, or even someone like Spike Cohen, who I think would be equally as good to have, in that position where they have the level of outward visibility and, breadth and depth of being able to take on what would be a difficult political campaign in 2024. So,
yeah, I think we all share that sentiment. We've interviewed Termott and Brechtenwald and who's that other guy? Forget what that guy's name was. Yeah.
No, the runoff guy. Chase Oliver.
Chase Oliver. That's
Chase
right.
Oliver.
Chase
Sorry.
Oliver.
Sorry, Chase.
And yeah. And I think every one of them, they bring something to the table, I guess, but it is a shame that Dave Smith is not the guy running. It'd be so much better if he was doing it, because these other guys, they're just not like Rechtenwald. I like Rechtenwald, but he just doesn't have the personality to rally people around him, I would say,
Right.
It's a shame.
We were talking about that earlier. I don't, Dave Smith, that's his deal, but that's him deciding not to, that's on him. And I completely get it, but man, I was pumped for that.
It does feel like some energy has been sapped from the movement.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What do you think we should do as libertarians to try to get some of that momentum back? Is there anything we can do with the people that are running, or what do you think? You've been thinking about this issue probably.
Yeah, I think that the way to have momentum back again is to move towards, I would say, supporting what it is that you're most passionate about that inspires people. I think that part of the reason that there was some momentum loss is it doesn't even lie with Dave Smith entirely. Certainly that he has his part in there. But there was a lot of division and discord among people who were short-term oriented and who were so frustrated with things not going their way immediately that they, essentially broke off from their initial support from the Macy's caucus and many different people. And there was lots of division and animosity over those things. And a part of that is that the people who, had come to the table in some parts were there for their own either self-aggrandizement or there to, basically build up their podcast following or whatever it is that they, that was more about them. And so when they didn't get their turn, they thought, they would, backstab people in that group. And I think that is a part of recognizing that you need to have very strong ethical and philosophical principles underpinning what it is that you're doing when you're creating these types of movements. You need virtue and character that transcends political season, because it's very easy for people to come in and feel all that energy of wanting things to change and to finally have their salvation with a certain candidate. But you need something that's a bit more sustainable, which begins with the individual, right? The thing that's most in your control is yourself, right? You may not be able to control what all the government does, but the thing you can control is how you treat others, how you think outside the state, how you take care of your loved ones and your friends, and how you become the healthiest, best person, best version of yourself. And I think that aspect was, starting to be missed in the process. I know that some people, but prior to that, had started to go down that journey through Jordan Peterson a bit. And, there was definitely some pushes for especially young men to think about their virtues and character and who they want to be. But I think we need something that is actually libertarian or voluntarist oriented in that way, which Peterson was not, as much as he may have helped inspire a lot of people toward being more philosophical and having self-care and respecting boundaries. He wasn't all the way there by far, because he fundamentally wasn't one of us. He wasn't one of our thinking, in our philosophy. So that's kind of what I think is most needed to build that sustainability that you could get up like when you had a real Ron Paul moment.
Yeah. Yeah. You know who's really good at this stuff is the communists, unfortunately. No, it's true. I mean, you think about it. They've been doing this shit for a long time. They got to figure out how to get their people motivated and interested, and no matter what happens, they just keep going. And somehow libertarians are going to have to figure out how to do the same thing.
Well, they definitely can. It's just, I think it truly a matter of that base, those cultural foundational values.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that has been put to the wayside where it was developing a lot back in 2006 to 2012. That had been percolating up, which in this, I talk about this also in my latest book, Philosophical Voluntarism.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about the sub branches of applied thinking, which includes things like peaceful parenting, nonviolent communication, unschooling, and thinking outside the state when it comes to personal finances. So there's a lot of different ways to apply it in one's life. And for some, they never got past just the basic political reactionary state of self, right? Just saying, oh, the government's bad and that sucks, but they didn't work on themselves too.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be what's necessary to have the sustainability where you have people who don't readily flake just at the first inconvenience, or at the first, oh, things don't go my way situation. So that's what I'm definitely trying to build with my framework and with what I've been putting out there.
Yeah, that's what I like. Why I like what you're doing, because I think there is a priming in the culture that's being more and more receptive to these kind of ideas, and what you're doing is part of that. And I want to touch on this. And Jack, I think you saw the Godzilla movie this weekend, the new Godzilla Zero. If I can geek a little bit on that, so they've been making Godzilla movies for 70 years since the original.
Yeah.
And they've mostly been like WWE giant monster bashes, right? Kind of brainless. In fact, they released one for the upcoming Kong versus Godzilla movie, which is coming out next year. And it just looked like, two monsters running toward camera, toward whatever. And it looks ridiculous. But I think people forget the original Godzilla movie came shortly on the heels of World War II. And Godzilla himself was essentially a way for Japan to deal with the trauma of having lost a war, felt the shame of that, and having 2 atomic bombs dropped on them. So this new movie is great because it goes back to that original concept where, that he's a monster again. And again, touching on how back to the original, it was a way for culture to be expressed through art, which I think art gives opportunity to talk about ideas that are difficult to talk about sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can take a concept that you couldn't discuss in the real world and set it on a far off planet, and then you can discuss it among the culture. But there's a point in the film which I thought was interesting, and you may know where I'm going. But the main character is a failed kamikaze pilot. So he's dealing with...
It's not if you're going to be a failed something, that's probably not a bad one to be.
He's dealing with the shame. I don't want to go too spoilery, but he's dealing with the shame of what he feels like he didn't fulfill his obligation. So he's dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt. And he kind of adopts a family. And in the midst of all this, Godzilla shows up. And as Godzilla going to do, he starts destroying Japan. And they really they really push the idea that he's a walking atomic bomb. His atomic breath in this movie really showcases that. But this Japanese community comes together, and at one point they say, we can't count on our government. They're failed. We can't count on the United States. They're not going to help us out of geopolitical reasons. And we as private citizens need to come together and find a solution to stop this menace.
Wow.
Now, do I think that this Japanese director's read Rothbard? No. But it's kind of cool that this movie's doing well this weekend, and I like that things like that are showing up in the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on that or the movie?
Yeah, I completely agree. Takashi Yamazaki, the person who not only directed this, but he was top down, pretty much all in control. He had that vertical integration. He did the special effects lead, so he made sure that that was good. He did the writing, he did the directing. I mean, he really controlled this movie, so it's his baby. He actually specifically said that he was unhappy with the government during the 2020, you could say, government enforced lockdowns and stuff like that, and he didn't like what the government was doing and how they were hiding information and being, incompetent. And that was a part of why he wrote the film the way he did, because it was supposed to actually be released sooner, but because of all the different disruptions over 2020, 2021, it took him longer to actually produce the movie, which allowed him to like really take his hatred of the Japanese government over that period and what they did and imbue it extra into the movie. So I guess there's one silver lining to all that it caused the Takashi to actually take the movie and make it extra anti-government because of how frustrated he was during that time. So you definitely see it in the Godzilla movie. There's themes being anti-war, pro-human, pro-private initiative, talking about how the government doesn't care about people and literally just wants them to die because they don't put ejection seats in the kamikaze planes. Right. They really just don't value human life. And the whole thing is about valuing family and human life and wanting to live on, and how the government, is covering things up and hiding information and doesn't value people. So I think this was probably the most libertarian Godzilla movie ever made, possibly one of the most libertarian themed movies of the year. Certainly, in my opinion, the best Godzilla movie of all time. And I'm a big Godzilla fan. I mean, I have all the movies, on VHS. I have a huge Godzilla collection. It's very sizable. So it was great to see this movie finally have a Godzilla rendition that was very satisfying on both the plot and the way they did and portrayed Godzilla in the action and things like that. So it was really inspiring.
Yeah, I encourage people to go see it. It's a Japanese movie made by the same studio that made the original. You're going to have to read subtitles, deal with it. But you could either watch that or give your money to the latest Marvel movie, The Marvels, which the trailer looks terrible. It's just tanking at the box office. So go see Godzilla.
Kind of to that same, I think there's a hunger for people to want kind of some of that stuff. I felt like, and it's not nearly as direct, but watching some of the Yellowstone series, I felt like there was some like kind of anti-woke, we'll get it done ourselves, kind of as a family or whatever. And now just with the Daily Wire coming out with this Lady Ballers movie, I'm curious to know what that does, how that does, just because I think there's a hunger for just real stuff or real thought, and not all the garbage that has been spewed over the last couple of years. I don't know what y'all think.
Probably so. I mean, you look at like Disney's numbers, Disney's movies numbers, they continue to tank. Like they keep playing these identity politics and shit like that, and it's not playing with the public in general. So, I don't know.
Have you? Do you get that same feeling, Jack?
I think that there's a huge sentiment of people who are tired with what's coming out of Hollywood, Disney, DC, and all that stuff these days. I think that the best part about it all actually is that because they're so beholden to these narratives, and they don't care about how much money they lose, it's opening up a huge market opportunity for people to produce things that are alternatives. And as you correctly noted, everything from the Daily Wire to Angel Studios and Tuttle Twins, Rippaverse, and what I'm doing with Voluntaryist, there's so many different people who are now having success in the wake of dissatisfaction of Hollywood's incessant preaching about SJW tropes. So it's a terrible thing for the fandoms and the lore, in terms of what's been done with the characters, but it's a great time for the parallel economy and people finally having their shot. People saying, where do I want my dollars to go instead? It's a great time for people who have something to offer that's different from this junk that's coming out of Marvel and DC.
Yeah, people are hungry for it, and so now is a great time to do things like that.
Yeah, you can see that with podcasts too. People are turning away from mainstream media. I don't even like using that term, mainstream media, the corporate media, and getting their news from alternative sources, or better sources, I should say. The advancement of technology makes it a lot better for the average person to produce this kind of content that people are hungering for. You don't have to rely on these big, powerful studios anymore to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like it's along with this, with what we're talking about, but also like I've said it before. We have a small woodworking business, and even that with people just wanting kind of like we're tired of the. I wonder. I guess I should say. I wonder if it's just we're tired of the crap, right? Be it crap off of Amazon. Yeah, it's way cheap or whatever. I'm not even trying to bash on them, but they're just tired of crap. Want real stuff. So just across the board, where are you going to get the real stuff? Well, you're going to get it from the parallel economy, from these individual producers, and then from small shops, local shops. I've lived here most of my life, and I've never seen any kind of farmer's market. And all of a sudden, there's farmer's markets. There's 2 a month down here. I think it's just kind of across the board. Just something I'm noticing. I've noticed. I don't know if y'all kind of. I guess y'all kind of see the same, but I think people are just tired of some of the junk and they just want real stuff. I feel like because of that, because of the message that libertarian minded people put out, it is real. It's one of the best times we've had in my lifetime, I feel like.
Yeah. And I think that the libertarians are the only ones that are going to be honest with people. And I think if we could just figure out a way to get people to realize that, everybody knows that the two major parties are lying to them. We get that. If we could figure out a way to get the average person to go, look, let's try this third party out, the libertarians. And I don't know, man, we just got to figure out a way to present that as honestly and clearly to people as possible. We got to figure out a way to get people to switch over, because if we don't, this country's so goddamn fucked.
And I think that begins with the culture.
Yeah. Like he was talking about, you got to change the culture.
Yeah. Well, and just like some of the one of the things I heard Tim Pool say it years ago, and it kind of reminds me of your comic book where he was I guess he'd set up a skate park like in his garage or something, and they had hung a Gadsden flag in there, and he said, I want kids to see that, so when it's talked about later on and they say it's racist or it's whatever, they say that can't be, these guys are skating. I like watching them on YouTube, and they got that flag hanging up. And it wasn't a year later that you had the Colorado incident where they were calling the kid had the Gadsden flag, and they were calling it racist on his back. So any of this stuff, like, young people, to me, is probably where it's at. Young, I've got 2 teenage sons, and they're into all kinds of pop culture kind of stuff. And if the more we can push it out there, the more they'll grow up with those ideas and know these ideas are good. So, yeah. Done with my rant now.
Thanks.
It was good.
A good one.
So you said you were a criminal defense attorney? Is that, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I did criminal defense as a primary focus, where I started with the certified legal internship, worked as a public defender, and then I handled some things afterward. I moved toward entertainment and contract law and a little bit of not-for-profit law, and then eventually transitioned to teaching.
So I myself kind of grew up with a conservative background. Families, my wife the same way. And here recently, she's gotten into podcasting in the last year or so. She didn't really listen to it. And I kept being like, hey, check this one out. And finally, somehow she got hooked on Michael Malice's podcast and loves it. And now, the law enforcement, the overreach of police and stuff, some of the stuff you're seeing more and more, of course, that I don't know if it was an algorithm or what, but Michael Malice led to her watching all kinds of videos and her going, what the heck? I can only imagine, as a criminal defense attorney, what you probably saw the state trying to push on. It had to have some bearing on becoming, your positions now, I would think. Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was 2 parts to it. One is just the research and looking at the nature of criminal laws and the history of criminal laws and seeing what government actually does with those things. Everything from looking at the history of gun control and seeing how gun control is just rooted in trying to disarm, free Black persons. That's pretty much the primary history of it. Outside of that, by and large, guns were just normal and everybody had them. And it was just when trying to disarm Black people that's when gun control really became a thing. So that's a fun history. To seeing my focus with juveniles, how the government's system of control in coordination with schooling creates a situation where those who are the poorest and have the most troubled home lives are the ones screwed the most, because the nature of schooling keeps young people in this command and control environment where the government's centrally planning their lives hour by hour. If the government were to say to you as an adult, like, hey, from 20 to 33, the government's going to tell you what to do hour by hour for the next 13 years. And if you don't like it, you're stupid. You'd be like, you're crazy. But they do that with kids all around the world. And they say, hey, you need to learn what we tell you is important. Who cares about what you're interested in? Who cares about what's going on for your life? Or if you're having struggles because your parents are divorced, you're being bullied or abused, whatever, they don't care. So, all that matters in that system is performance and signaling. And so the criminal system as it relates to juveniles was very tied to that, where it's like, oh, how are you doing in school? Right. Like that's all they cared about. It's like, what are your grades? It doesn't matter whether or not they're struggling because of abuse at home or abuse elsewhere, that kind of thing. It was just really wild to see how much is just about signaling, no matter what, even on the criminal side of things in juvenile court. So that was definitely a big part of my development into promoting what's called unschooling, which I also do talk about in my books. But unschooling is this idea that young people can learn freely without being controlled and put into these one-size-fits-all curriculum regimes, with adults acting as facilitators instead of performance judges. And this is not something that's like totally new. There's actually entire schools dedicated to this, like the Sudbury Valley School in Framingham, Massachusetts, which has been around since 1968. And there's many other like it where young people are free to learn through play, and they're not threatened or shamed or told to be stupid if they don't learn to read this level by this age, which is kind of ridiculous already, because every single person develops at different times. Not everybody's biology goes at the same time. So, the ability and capacity changes, with growth. And when this happens, young people just pick up learning naturally because it's just what they do. They soak things in, just like a baby learns to talk and walk. You don't have to put a baby into walking school in order to learn to walk, right? They learn by experimenting and playing and wanting to engage. It's the same thing with everything else. And young people, are able to pick up reading and numeracy just by engaging with the world around them. And they do so readily. It's not a strange thing. It's a very normal thing when it comes to enabling young people just to learn based on their interests, instead of trying to force them into whatever it is, some adult thinks they should value. Who's not living their life, of course, and isn't responsible for what their life's going to be. So I definitely promote that philosophy as a part of what I do, and certainly point to other people who enact this, routinely, because they either are unschoolers by virtue of being a parent, or they manage a self-directed learning center or co-op or a homeschool co-op, or they do different types of shared spaces and things like that. So I highly recommend the book Unschooled: Raising Curious, Well-Educated Children Outside the Conventional Classroom by Carrie McDonald. She's the one I like to point to a lot. She has her master's degree in education from Harvard. She's unschooled her 4 kids, and she's a Foundation for Economic Education scholar. She's a fellow there, and she interviews all these different unschooling co-ops and centers and all this kind of stuff in this alternative education, and reports on that and does analysis on it and helps people see that it's real and flourishing.
Yeah. We have a guy that we've had on a couple times, Todd, and he's retired public school teacher. And it was crazy on our last one. He was talking about some of the people that are what is he calls it? He lives a nomadic lifestyle. He lives national forest to national forest, and some of the people that he meets that are schooling this way, homeschooling this way, and from time to time they learn about where they're at, right there. And it's crazy because he is so against, at this point, he thinks it's so wrong. And we're talking about some public schooling and the way it's gone. And we're talking about someone who just recently retired, and that was his profession forever. And I think we were talking about it earlier. I think it has quite a bit of merit coming from someone like that as well. I mean, from everybody, or from anybody that knows that, but especially someone that was their profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my dad is a 30-year retired New York City school teacher. So I got to see that firsthand, when I would visit him at school, how crazy that could be. And of course, I myself went to school. I'm sure most all y'all here did too. So you have your own experiences to remember and relate from. And then I got to see that whole gamut of children being in classrooms and juvenile detention halls, to actually being a substitute teacher, full-time school teacher at 8A high school, which is a large student body population high school, and at a K-8 charter school. And I later had a tutoring company and work with young people that way too. So I got to see kind of a really robust gamut of different kids and environments and schooling situations, and all of it completely informs me about how horrific the compulsory schooling model is.
Yeah. Well, Chris, do you have?
No, I think that's it. Appreciate you coming on. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Did you?
No, I'm fresh out of whatever.
Did you want to talk about anything, your things that you have
Yeah,
going on?
What
or
you got
what-
going on?
What's coming up?
Yeah. Okay, great. So for me, in terms of just, wrapping what it is that I have going on, if you want to check out what we're doing, my website, Jack, JCKV as a voluntarist, Lloyd, LOYD, that's 2 L's, jackvloyd.com is a place where you can check out some of my work. It shows different things like music videos and comic books, nonfiction books, all that good stuff. And right now, the big thing is we're on Indiegogo doing our Suit Saga 1 campaign, which is our next arc after the Origins comic series, which we're finished up on that. We have a 192-page trade paperback. It looks beautiful, full wrap. That's that whole origin story. We're now on the second arc where we're getting into how and why the protagonist Jack gets his suit. So that's why it's called Suit Saga. And we are over 100% funded on that. We actually have passed the first stretch goal. So people are going to get bonus perks along with their regular perks for supporting at the print comic tier level or higher. And that first perk is a character turn art print of a new character, Libertas. And we're really excited for this because it's the fastest funding we've ever had in terms of time. So it's pretty incredible right now. We've actually already outpaced our Origins 1 through 5 campaigns. So it's pretty exciting. So definitely check that out. Pick up a copy. It makes for a great gift as well, Christmas gift. And of course, if you want to pick up the past single issues, you can too on Indie Planet. If you go to my website, Volcomic, that's VOL, so V as in Voluntaryist, VOLCOMIC.com, volcomic.com, you can see the listings for the single issue floppy comics. If you want to pick that up on Indie Planet, it's on print on demand. So they just print it the second you order it. So it's not sitting on a shelf. You can just get it whenever you want, catch up, and join in for the new adventures. So I appreciate all that support and anybody who wants to check that out.
Jack, when are we going to get you out to a Comic-Con to meet and greet fans?
I would love to. I've actually finally got to the point where now I think I can table because I have everything finished the remaster. I have all the comics and what's needed. I do normally table at Liberty conventions, but I wanted to get out. And some of the ones that I've been thinking about going to is possibly the Tampa Bay Comic Con. That could be fun. I've been to Dragon Con. I've been to MegaCon. I've been to Big Apple Comic Con. I haven't been to the official, Comic Con, in California, the San Diego one, but I would love to, if I can make it make sense. But in the meantime, at least the mid-sized comic conventions I would definitely like to table at, and probably am considering, tabling finally at one of them.
Great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, Jack, it's been great having you on. We'll get all your stuff put on the show notes, and hopefully we can talk to you again later.
Good to meet you, Jack.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. No, thank you, Chris, and thanks, Dean, JD. Appreciate you all for having me on and having this great roundtable.
All
All right. Thank
Thanks,
you,
man.
sir.
Have a good one.
Have
Thanks.
a good one.